If we go through the scientific advice protocol assistance offered by EMA, is a process by which the agency gives advice on the appropriate tests and studies in the development of a medicinal product. Scientific advice helps the company to make sure that it performs the appropriate tests and studies, so no major objections will be expected after the submission of the dossier compiled following scientific advice. This is applicable of all types of medicinal products, even not aiming to file a centralized procedure. Scientific advice can be performed by the European Medicines Agency or by a national competent authorities at any stage of development. However, it is advised not to go with scientific advice very close to the intended date of the submission of the application. So the scientific advice and protocol assistant will allow to optimize the development, and it has a potential impact in the development time, because we will know the type of studies that will be accepted. In terms of cost and time, scientific advice with EMA for any innovative product has a scientific scope, and the procedure takes from formally 40 to 70 days of active study, but in turn it comes to take up to 5 or 6 months. The fees are important, 89,000 euro if questions are of the quality, safety and clinical, unless a reduction applies. On the other hand, if we go to a national competent authority to ask for scientific advice, the timelines are a bit shorter, of 3-4 months, and the fees can vary depending on the national competent authority selected and on the type of questions that we are going to ask. There are a number of fee incentives that the EMA applies, which are basically a 90% reduction of the total applicable fee for non-orphan medicinal products for small, medium enterprise, and there is a 100% reduction for orphan medicinal products and 100% reduction as well for products in the prime scheme. We will talk about the prime scheme later. Basically, this is the process. I will not stop, but we have 2 months in advance a notification, a draft application, a submission of a final request after normally a pre-submission meeting with the EMA, and if we are in the 40-day process, we will obtain a final letter after this assessment. If clarification is required, our procedure will be turned to a 70-day process, and it will involve an oral hearing. So we will go to discuss with EMA at this step of clarification, and after that we will obtain a final letter. On the other hand, the advice given by national competent authority is shorter in timelines because we submit the advice request, we have a meeting discussion where the questions are discussed directly with the national competent authority, and we obtain a final letter, but at the time of the meeting discussion, we will obtain the advice, we will take a minute, so the timeline in overall is shorter. We have other type of scientific advice. So we have presented the EMA scientific advice, which is 40, 70 days, 5 to 6 months, and these fees. The protocol assistance for orphan drugs has a number of significant reductions for the fees, but we have the option to go to parallel scientific advice with EMA, adding the advice of health technology agency bodies. This is to encompass the advice leading to later reimbursement and pricing policies to satisfy also the health technology agencies in this case. In this case, we are going to pay the fees for EMA, for EMA, and also the fees that the health technology agencies have for this type of meetings. Another type is the parallel scientific advice with EMA and FDA. Note that this is not a joint scientific advice. This is a parallel scientific advice because we submit in parallel and the EMA provides the advice and the FDA provides the advice that can be divergent and not the same. For this reason, this is parallel, this is called parallel and not joint. At this point, we will see that the FDA format of these meetings is normally a type B meeting and attracts no fee. So in this type of parallel scientific advice, we will be paying only the EMA fees, except in the case of biosimilars for the FDA that we will see that is an exception. In addition, we have new specific scientific advice for biosimilars in Europe since 2017. In February 2017, the EMA launched a tailored scientific advice pilot project intended to review the quality, analytical, and functional data of biosimilar development. Is open to all type of biosimilar. The pilot part finished the last year and includes a pre-submission meeting, and the timelines are a bit longer than the regular scientific advice because the EMA is giving here more processed advice on the documentation given. This is what we have for Europe. If we see some statistics, we will see that the scientific advice and protocol assistants at EMA are extensively used with a number of almost 7,000 procedures so far since the procedures started. Then we will see here as well that the parallel consultation advice and the qualification of novel methodologies that are relatively new have still a small number of applications if we compare with the total number. Another data that we can present is that there is an important number of scientific advice procedures for ATMPs, for advanced therapy medicinal products. So far, since the start of the applications with the regulation on ATMPs, we have almost 400 scientific advice procedures for this type of products. If we go to the FDA, we have formal meetings. We have the opportunity to discuss with the FDA informal meetings between the FDA and sponsors for applicants of BsUFA products. BsUFA means that we are working in the innovative products, non-generic products. Okay, and the scientific advice meetings are the parallel to scientific advice meetings are basically the type B meetings under BsUFA. These meetings are intended to optimize development and of course have a potential impact in the development time because we will know the opinion of regulators about our development. The last guidance on the formal meetings regarding the types, the documentation to be submitted, and the format of the meetings was revised in 2017. We have now a guidance for industry from 2017. dealing with the PDUFA innovative products meetings. But interestingly, we have also a draft guidance for industry for sponsors developing biosimilars. This is called the BsUFA products. This is intended to provide advice to the applications under development and review of biosimilars or interchangeable biological products. And we have here a different type of meetings, the Biosimilar Initial Advisory, BIA, and the Biosimilar Biological Product Development meetings, BDP meetings, and we have these types. We will see each one. Again, these meetings contribute to optimize development and to have a potential impact in the development time. If we focus on the type B meetings, we can have the pre-IND meetings before submitting our IND to conduct studies under an IND to discuss the non-clinical pharmacotoxicology, chemistry, and initial clinical protocol, the end of phase 1 meetings, end of phase 2A meetings, and end of phase 2, pre-NDA and pre-BLA meetings. And we can use the meetings as well to discuss breakthrough therapy or RMAT products, the pre-NDA or pre-BLA meetings, or other type of applications. If we go now to the meeting, this is a relatively new information, the meeting types under the BsUFA. We can go through an initial assessment for the BIA meeting for a general discussion on feasibility of a biosimilar application to obtain general advice and preliminary analytical similarity data and present our general overview on development. Other type of meetings that are the BDP type 1, BDP type 2, BDP type 3, and 4. For instance, the type 1 are intended to discuss clinical holds, non-agreement, special protocol assessments, or safety issues, dispute resolution meetings, post-actions after a requirement from the FDA, and meetings after a refuse to file letter. This is when basically a type 1 meeting under BDP is when something went wrong. Other type of meeting, the type 2, is to discuss a specific issue, such as quality attributes, chemistry, manufacturing, and controls. The type 3 meeting, in contrast, is intended to review in depth the meeting development program. And for this meeting, we should have an important number of data. Type 4 are the pre-submission meetings to discuss when we are coming closer to the submission of a biosimilar product. The meeting format with the FDA can be face-to-face and could include attendees by teleconference, could be teleconference or video conference, or could be written response only meetings that are still considered a formal meeting. Another type of meetings that we can help, for instance, with the EMA, are the qualification of novel methodologies. This is a program that was launched to explore the acceptability of a new technology, a biomarker for a specific use in pharmaceutical research and development, to obtain input on protocol, study reports, or to establish the use of new technologies. We have two types of qualification of novel methodologies meetings: the qualification opinion that will provide a public document that can be discussed, is intended to be discussed by the scientific community and other sponsors, or a qualification advice which will result in a confidential document provided only to the sponsor, to the applicant, and we can obtain a letter of support made available by the EMA to our novel methodology or to our novel technology. These type of meetings have the same fees as the basic scientific advice. Similarly, the FDA launched in 2016 a biomarker qualification program. This is makes part of the qualification of drug development tools and has the same or similar scope than the qualification of novel methodologies by the EMA. We'll be focusing on biomarkers used in drug development. And once the biomarker is qualified, it can be used in any drug development program under the context for which it obtained qualification. It has a process similar to other scientific advice meetings or meetings with the FDA. We have here the links to the information. Well, this was an overview of the possible type of meetings with EMA and FDA, and we will see now an overview of designation and programs that are available as tools to expedite the development and registration procedures. Of course, of these designations and programs can be object of discussions during the meetings with the EMA and FDA. For instance, the first is that we will present is the PRIME, which stands for Priority Medicines Scheme. It was launched by the EMA in 2016 and is intended to optimize the development and accelerate assessment of medicines of major public health interest. It is an interaction and early dialogue with medicine developers and is aimed at products under development, innovative, with intention to file a centralized procedure. An important feature here of the PRIME is that the PRIME is intending to identify fulfilling criteria for accelerated review. We will see that accelerated review under the EMA concepts means that the regular timelines of assessment of 210 days become shortened to 150. The possibility to an accelerated review is a frequently asked question to regulators in scientific advice meetings. So shall my development will qualify for accelerated review? And so far, it very precise answer from the regulators. The frequently received response was, well, it is too early, we don't know, we will see in a later stage. One of the advantages of the PRIME is that if we are given, our PRIME is, if our medicinal development is eligible for the PRIME scheme, we will be assured, or we can claim that our development is fulfilling criteria for accelerated review. Then this PRIME is intended to accelerate development and review process for a potential early access of medicine. Well, we have several reports published in the EMA website of the first 2 years of PRIME. We will see that this is the breakdown of the PRIME eligibility request received by the EMA during these first 2 years of activity. And we will see that according to the latest statistics of the monthly EMA monthly report from April 2020 that the success rate is relatively low. That we have for 32% or 34%, so an average of 33% of applications that have been found eligible for this PRIME scheme. If we see now the figures that the eligibility of PRIME program of PRIME scheme for ATMPs, we will see that the figures of success are slightly higher, but not that much, because so far since the start of the PRIME scheme program in 2016, a total of 76 applications have been discussed and 32 have been granted. That means 42% of success for ATMPs. That compared to the 33% of the non-ATMP or general applications is a bit higher, but not that much. The parallel program to the PRIME in the FDA framework is the Breakthrough Therapy Designation. This Breakthrough Therapy Designation started in 2012 and is designed to expedite the development and review of drugs, only for drugs intended to treat a serious condition, and we need the preliminary clinical evidence of the efficacy of the medicinal product on a clinical significant endpoint. So this designation can be requested in parallel with an IND. So we need to open an IND to apply for a breakthrough therapy designation, or can be requested after, no later than the end of phase 2 meetings. There are intensive guidance on efficient drug development, eligibility to fast track designation features, and expedite review options such as rolling review and others. Rolling review, as explained, is that, for instance, if we have parts of the application already compiled, we submit the part of the application, for instance, the CMC part or the non-clinical part that we have already compiled, and the FDA will review this part of my application in a review cycle. And when I will have more information, I will open another cycle of rolling review. So this is a breakthrough therapy designation intended to accelerate development and review process, allowing for a potential early access. We have here several a breakdown of data of total requests received, granted, and denied, and withdrawn, that can be consulted at the FDA website. Another program is the Fast Track Designation. The Fast Track Designation is intended to facilitate the expedited development and review of new drugs and biologics, intended to serious or life-threatening conditions with non-clinical or clinical data demonstrating the potential to address unmet medical needs. Attention, because we can submit the Fast Track Designation having non-clinical evidence. So we don't have to wait until having demonstrated clinical evidence. Requests can be submitted at an IND phase with the supporting documentation, or anytime during the drug development. In this program, if we receive the Fast Track designation, we will have more frequent meetings and written communications with FDA to discuss the drug development plan. And we can access to eligibility for accelerated approval and priority review if relevant criteria are met. We will see what is accelerated approval and priority review, because these terms are often confused, and we will have access as well to this type of rolling review. We have also statistics at the FDA website on the Fast Track designation requests, so we can see how is the total requests received granted. So on the contrary to that we see to the PRIME scheme, the granting of Fast Track designations occurs more often in a higher percentage. So we can, this is a summary of the data that we can present until December 28. If we focus now on the regulatory tools for early access, so shorter development or shorter review process. So the shorter review process means that, well, we can have negotiated, or we can have discussed with the FDA or with the EMA our development plans. But another thing is that, well, what will happen when I submit my marketing authorization application or my NDA? So the accelerated assessment is a concept that started in 2004 by the EMA for the reduction of time frame of the assessment of an application. The standard timelines for a review of application is 210 days, that, considering the clock stops during the procedure, takes 1 year, more or less. And in the accelerated assessment, we can have a shorter timeline of active assessment of 120 days, leading normally to reduce the approval time to half. This accelerated assessment is normally discussed during development. So if we have been granted a PRIME, we will be more certain that we can go through this accelerated assessment. That is a very important information for our management board and for our investors and our milestones. But this request can only be submitted 2-3 months before the marketing authorization application submission, and always should be in view of major public health interest and important therapeutic innovation. So the accelerated assessment by EMA is intended to accelerate the review process and has no impact in the development time. In parallel, in the FDA, we have the priority review designation. This priority review designation is intended as well to reduce the assessment time. For an innovative product, for an NDA or a VLA, the standard review time of the FDA is 10 months. In this priority review designation, the FDA divisions commit to conduct the assessment in only within 6 months. This is, again, for significant improvements in safety of effectiveness of the treatment, diagnosis, or prevention of a serious condition. Again, we submit this priority review designation at the time of the submission of our NDA or BLA, and the FDA informs us if we are granted this 6 months time accelerated review within 16 days of the receipt of my BLA or NDA or an efficacy supplement, so a variation of the original application. Again, this is to accelerate the review process and has no impact in the development time. Another type of expedite pathway that allows the EMA is the granting of a conditional marketing authorization. A conditional marketing authorization program started in the year 2004 and consists in the granting of a conditional marketing authorization before comprehensive clinical data are available. This is only for centralized procedure and is compatible with accelerated assessment. So the scope is for those medicines intended to treat, prevention or diagnosis of seriously debilitating disease, life-threatening disease, to be used in emergency situations in response to public health threats, or designated are orphan medicinal products, and the requirements are that is likely that in the future the applicant can provide comprehensive clinical data and an unmet medical need will be fulfilled by the use of this medicine in this conditional marketing authorization. So the benefit to public health outweighs the risks of the fact that there is not yet a complete package of clinical data. So this is a tool for early access and has an impact in the development time to marketing authorization. That means that part of my development, my clinical development program, I will conduct this development after my conditional marketing authorization. But then how I go from my conditional marketing authorization to marketing authorization, I will need to conduct confirmatory trials. The conditional marketing authorization has a validity of 1 year, and I need to submit annual renewals, including interim reports on fulfillment of specific obligations. I can switch to marketing authorization, non-conditional, when comprehensive data is submitted, confirming a positive benefit-risk balance. I can apply for the switch from conditional to regular marketing authorization in the renewal or another procedure. After that, I will have a full marketing authorization with a standard 5-year validity. Well, this is the graphic with the mean duration of assessment, including clock stops, of these conditional marketing authorizations. And conditional marketing authorization 10-year report published by EMA, and also a breakdown granted by conditional marketing authorization granted by therapeutic area. Another term that is parallel in the FDA is the accelerated approval pathway. This is not to be confused with the accelerated review. This is quite confusing and sometimes requires an explanation. This accelerated approval is similar to the conditional approval. The accelerated approval means that serious drugs for serious conditions that fulfill unmet medical need can be approved based on a surrogate endpoint or an intermediate clinical endpoint, allowing an early submission. So the accelerated approval is a similar concept than the conditional marketing authorization. So in this case, a surrogate endpoint is used for accelerated approval as the biomarker, and we have an intermediate clinical endpoint as a measure of efficacy. However, I will need to conduct confirmatory trials as well. So this tool allows an early access and an impact in the development time up to marketing authorization, because I will be allowed to submit my marketing authorization before the finalization of my confirmatory trials. In a similar scenario, the adaptive pathways developed by the EMA considered as well the use of this intermediate or early regulatory approval, which is prospectively planned, and the collection of post-approval data on the medicines used in patients. This is an iterative development program, so I will have also an intermediate population, a subset of population in which I can obtain clinical data, but I can obtain early regulatory approval for a bigger subset, for a bigger population, and obtain and confirm this approval later. So in this case, I have also an early access and an impact in the development time up to my marketing authorization. And to finalize, we have here a set of regulatory tools for the support to specific type of medicinal products. Now, all these procedures and designations that I have presented until this point are applicable to all type of products, as long as the conditions are fulfilled, so the serious condition, or the unmet medical need, and the availability of non-clinical or clinical data, depending on the programs. But we have a specific regulatory tools that are specific for the support of certain medicinal products. For instance, the Rare Pediatric Disease Priority Review Voucher program. This is a specific program from the established by the FDA, in which a rare pediatric disease, that means that orphan a product intended to treat an orphan condition and also a pediatric condition can be given a priority review voucher. This is a priority review voucher for a subsequent marketing authorization and for a different product, not for the pediatric, my rare pediatric product. This is also often a point of confusion. This voucher request is submitted with my NDA or BLA submission of the rare pediatric disease medicinal product. So with my rare pediatric disease application, I submit this voucher request. This voucher request then it can be used in a subsequent marketing application for a different product, or sold to another sponsor. For instance, we have here examples of companies that, having obtained a voucher, have sold this voucher to other companies by an important amount of dollars. So we have here examples, and the voucher is granting automatically an accelerated assessment. That means that the time of assessment by the FDA will be reduced from 10 months to 6. Another program that is less known is the Qualified Pathogens Gain Act qualifying list, that is intended to establish the qualified infectious disease product to treat serious or life-threatening infections caused by antibacterial or antifungal resistant pathogens. And this program is not providing an accelerated assessment by itself, or not providing an advantage on the development, but provides an additional 5 years of exclusivity, so we can prolong our exclusivity in the market, our data protection, by 5 years if we are granted in if our medicinal product is granted in this qualified pathogens list that is for the treatment of this list of conditions. Another designation that can be given to only to advanced therapy medicinal products is the RMAT designation, intended to protect and to allow the regenerative medicine, and in fact this for ATMP products in general, to obtain advantages in terms of development and in the review process. Another program that is also scarcely known, because it's only intended to advanced therapy medicinal products and limited to small medium enterprise registered at EMA, is the European Program of Certification Procedure, that based on a subset of quality or non-clinical data, I can have a kind of approval of this part of my development. This is a kind of standalone evaluation procedure independent from a future application for marketing authorization. A certificate will be issued by EMA for that part of my development, but this is not legally binding with regard to a future regulatory procedure. And as I said, this only can be used by a small, medium enterprise and ATMPs. In summary, the certification procedure is a 90-day procedure, but in considering the whole procedure, it takes around 9 months. And I can certify my quality data or my non-clinical data at a certain point. I can be given certification by the EMA that my development is in agreement with current scientific standards and guidelines. I can work in an iterative manner, so I can conduct iterations. So if I have a block of quality data, I can obtain a first certificate. I can go through a first certification procedure and obtain a qualification, certification of my quality data and its methodology is in agreement with the standards. But later on, when I have a non-clinical data pack plus an updated pack of quality data, I can apply for a second follow-up certificate and have the certification of my data at that time. So far, the certification procedure is not so frequently used because of the small scope only intended for ATMPs and small medium enterprise. And then to finalize the webinar, presentation of when all these programs are applicable. For instance, if we see the development line of development cycle of a medicinal product in the research and development, preclinical, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4, we can interact with the innovation task force at the early stage and conduct scientific advice during all the clinical development, and even for new indications or applications after obtaining the marketing authorization. The only parenthesis would be, in scientific advice, the time of the regulatory assessment of my marketing application. I can use the adaptive pathways depending on my surrogate endpoints or my intermediate points that I can set the steps of the clinical development. I can apply for the prime scheme at certain phases. Small medium enterprise have the advantage to the possibility to apply to this program with less data than the non-small medium enterprise. So this is an advantage for small medium enterprise here. I can apply for conditional approval for at a certain stage at the end of phase 2 with a condition of phase 3, or in the phase 3 with a commitment to conduct other studies. At the time of the marketing authorization application, I can apply for accelerated assessment that will be reducing my assessment time. For the FDA programs, if we do the parallel exercise, we have the Interact and the FDA Formal Meetings with the same distribution. We can apply for the Fast Track with preclinical data, or during development when I have clinical evidence of my effectiveness in the condition. Breakthrough therapy here, because we need preliminary evidence of the clinical efficacy. And accelerated approval, that means that well, maybe I can be given this accelerated approval designation, but it does not mean automatically a priority review. A priority review for my BLA or NDA, shortening the review cycles from 10 months to 6 months, will be given only after the marketing authorization application. And well, I know that this is a lot of information, but for any question, we will be available to respond. Thank you.